Peter Precht, the host of Optometry Profits Revealed, and today I'm here with Susan Klacik, and she is the second VP of the Opticians Association of Pennsylvania, and we're going to do a quick interview here. Nice to see you, Susan. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here, Peter. Really appreciate the opportunity.
So we'll start off with what made you pursue optical?
Desperation for a job. It's pretty funny. I was living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania,
Ah,
ironically, which is where we're having our first convention. How cool is that? I
right.
was I was living in Lancaster, getting ready to get married. I was working a seasonal job at the time, late in the year, basically a Christmas season job, and I was so sure they were going to keep me on because I was so good and I put my heart into it. And they didn't. As soon as the season was up, they let me go, and I needed to find something fast. And there were two ads in the paper for two positions. One of them for a frame stylist at Total Vision Care in Lancaster, which I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
no longer exists.
No, they don't.
Um,
Yeah.
yes, and the second one was for a health club, and the health club had like paid twice as much, and there was commissions. And then this, of course, the Total Vision Care frame stylist was minimum wage. I won't
Right.
even tell you what it was because it's embarrassing. It would give you a better idea of how long ago this was.
Yeah.
But long story short, I interviewed at the health club, which turned out not to be a health club. It turned out to be a seedy place that I could not possibly work. I left that interview, went straight to the other interview.
Oh man,
I'm shaking because
you knew it.
I was it was crazy. So I walk into this other interview and I get taken into this dark exam room, asked to sit in the exam chair, and I'm one on one with this
And like,
guy.
not
And,
again.
yeah, it was scary. No, but in any case, I settled down and he hired me on the spot for minimum wage.
Oh,
And I still, that is how I got my start in optics. It was just kind of
saved you.
a goofy thing, yes. And I have to tell you, I had some fun with it because when I got home, my fiance said, "So did you get the job at the health club?" And I said, "No, but you really didn't want me to have the job at the health club." Then I began to explain why in great detail, and oh, he was outraged. But in any case, yeah. So I got that job, got my start, worked with a wonderful crew of people there, and that's how it all began for me. That's how it began.
And this kind of rolls into the next question: is where did you train or educate or get your education? And
It was
there you
there.
go.
It was
Mm-hmm.
right there on the job training. I
Mm-hmm.
remember. I don't remember his last name, but the optical manager there, the practice manager's name was Bob. He oversaw all of the staff. I remember within a month I had gotten $1 an hour raise and was
Nice.
given a mild promotion because I was just so eager and I fell in love with it. In
Right.
school growing up, I mean, my favorite classes were science and math. And so this was right up my alley. And for years, I had worked in the service industry, so customer service came very
Right.
naturally to me. I love people. So I'm one of those weirdos that I could sit and do spreadsheets all day and be happy, but I can also be out and about with people all day and be happy. That's a rare combination, and it
It
fits.
is.
It fits really
Uh,
well with eye care, I have to say.
yeah. Yeah, they're usually two totally different, personality types for sure,
Correct.
and they're not usually spreadsheet people are not really into hanging out with other people. I mean, they're not that they're not, but or they're not as personable. How's that? We could say.
Sure.
Um.
Well,
So.
I'll tell a brief story about that on the job training. I had a really good friend who made a lot more money than I did, and he purchased a book for me so that I could start teaching myself. Because
Oh.
the people at the office were getting a little frustrated. Like I would be asking questions incessantly, wanted to learn more, wanted to know why, wanted to know how, wanted
Give her a
to.
book.
So I bought a book, and I'll never forget the day. I went into the office and I threw that book in my boss's face. I'm like, Bob, look. He had the day prior made me send this poor woman away. She came in, she had a plastic or Xyl frame, and the eye wire was broken. It was
Hmm.
broken right up at the bridge. And he told me you have to find another frame those lenses will fit in, or you just have to sell her another frame. And so we tried every frame in a place. I really tried to help her. And she said, well, the truth is I don't have the money for a frame anyway. And if you can't help me, then I'll just have to deal with this. So she left. Well, the next day I went back and I showed Bob how I could have done It wouldn't have been particularly attractive, but I could have repaired that frame and let her walk
Right.
out with the glasses. I could have drilled 2 holes on either side of that bridge. I
Mm-hmm.
could have sewn it together with
Yep.
our semi-remus line, and she
Yep.
would have at least had glasses on her face. And when she did have the
Mm-hmm.
money, where do you think she would have gone to get her new glasses?
I
So
totally agree with you.
yeah,
I,
yeah. He just
those.
rolled his eyes and shook his head and said, "Susan, what am I going to do with you?"
She's like, he's like, you're not giving this thing 20 minutes and breaking the drill out. That's what he was really thinking.
Of course, of course.
But you're right. I mean, whenever those things happen, it is completely. And you've kind of answered the next question was when was the moment that you kind of fell in love with opticianry,
That,
and it
that
probably sounds like it was right there. It sounds like.
Actually, I remember that moment well, and that's a great question. Thank you for asking. The
Mm-hmm.
moment I fell in love with opticianry was the moment a 2-year-old little girl who had come in,
Mm-hmm.
been examined, she had a severe refractive error. She was probably in the +6 range, and I don't even know how they managed to examine her. When they brought
Right.
this little girl in originally, she was lethargic. Like she was just
Depressed.
so quiet and
Mm.
compliant and just kind of, you know, so
Mm.
fast forward after she's had her glasses for 2 months, mom brings her in. We all look at each other and it's like, Glenn, it's your turn, or Susan, it's your turn, because this little girl went from being the quiet little child that entertained themselves in the corner to the terrible twos overnight. She couldn't see. And so now she could see and she wanted everything. And the
Mm-hmm.
moment that her mom, it was my turn. And it was, I remember her
Mm-hmm.
mom sat her down, put her arms around that little girl and clung to her while I took the glasses off of her face to repair, adjust, whatever. They were all messed up. And that little girl would scream like you were stabbing her with a hot knife the whole time you were
Mm.
doing the repair, the adjustment, the fix, whatever it was. And then as soon as you put them back on, she would just collapse into her mother's arms. That's when I fell in love with opticianry. And I realized I really understood the impact that
Right.
it can have on a person's
Right.
life. So I
Right.
remember
Because
that
when our
moment.
vision is not that bad, it is a wow moment. And many of us have seen it in the minus range where you're watching a child holding their hand up and flex their fingers, and you're realizing, whoa, they thought that thing looked like a mitt,
Sure.
and they didn't see digits before, and that's challenging. But there are moments that we work for,
Yes,
and they change the life of everybody that's involved.
absolutely.
Um, and so why are you passionate about eye care? And I think we've kind of been hitting on this. It's not necessarily one particular answer. We've been hitting on that, but let's very much relate to. I'd love to end these with a mentor story,
Ah,
and I think you've got a pretty good one. So you know, tell me who's impacted you the most.
so I, as I mentioned, I can't even say I bought books and taught myself. Friends bought me books, and I taught myself a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
thanks to that and my, I don't know, I guess ambition, I really pursued what when I was at Total Vision Care. I had basically tapped that out. I wanted to move over to the contact lens side after being with
Mm-hmm.
them for a while, and they said we need
Right.
you where you are. And so I took
Right.
a job across the street working for a doctor that wanted a contact lens technician. I wanted to learn something new, and so
Mm.
I did that a lot. My early in my career, I would move for the next opportunity to learn. um, the probably the most powerful change I made was out of the actual eye care, and I took a position with Sola Optical at the time, and they actually had a customer service and warehouse, a stock house, in just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I got a
Mm-hmm.
position there, and as it turned out, I was the only single person there on the phones who had any eye care experience whatsoever. Everybody else
Wow.
there, the people I worked with in customer service, had never even walked out into the warehouse to open a box to see what it was they were taking orders for. So
Wow.
we were basically taking orders from laboratories in the Northeast. They had regional
Mm-hmm.
stock offices. And so labs
Mm-hmm.
would call and you could literally do the job with your eyes closed if you were good, if you had the keyboard memorized. And they would just say, I want a 6 base 2 add right, this lens,
Right.
this material, whatever. And so when I was working there, there was a fellow by the name of Ralph Kent. He worked for Sola as well, and his home office was there at that particular stock office.
Mm-hmm.
And Ralph was never there. He was rarely there because he traveled all over the United States as their national technical service advisor. So he would actually go into these laboratories when they were having issues with their process, roll up his sleeves and help them work out whatever the kinks were, whether they were having issues with blocking the progressives or producing new materials like when they launched Spectralite. Nobody could get that lens out the door without producing waves and so on. And so he was
Right.
doing that. But when he was in the Harrisburg office, he picked up on the fact that I happened to know more than anybody else. I didn't know much. I was pursuing and studying for my ABO at that time. And I remember after just a very short while in that position, only 6 months, I got a pink slip. They were eliminating these regional stock offices and consolidating the entirety of those operations in Northern California, where the manufacturing,
Petaluma.
yes, Petaluma,
Mm-hmm.
California, where manufacturing and
Mm-hmm.
R&D, U.S. based, scientific
Right.
ophthalmic laboratories of Australia. A lot of people never understood
Right.
that Sola was an Australian originally.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So immediately I thought, I'm out of a job, back to square one. And my dear friend Ralph, he encouraged me to take that chance, take that move, do it, Susan, because you won't be in customer service for very long. You belong on the technical service team. And
Right.
that man, if I can count just on one hand, say the 5 people who most influenced my entire life, not just my career, but my life, that man encouraging me the way he did, helping me the way he did, convincing me that I could do this. I could move to California
Right.
without a pay increase and survive.
Right. Right.
um, uh, it changed my life forever.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
I landed there, and then I ended up. He was right. Within 18 months, I was on the technical service team. So between Ralph Kent and Steve uh, um, Maycall, who many people understand founded OptiBoard. That was his baby.
Right.
That was
That
his
was his.
hobby
Yeah.
on the side when he was leading the
Mm.
technical service team in Petaluma. Mark Madison Shupnick was the vice president of new product development. He oversaw our department. His office was right around the corner from mine. Luann Modulin. There was just this incredible team, and
Mm-hmm.
I learned what it meant to say. They've stuck me on the hotline, the technical service hotline, and I would say I wasn't 2 weeks in the job when I stopped trying to answer questions, realizing I didn't know anything, because I had actually in the middle of all that did pursue and got my ABO certification, and so, but 2 weeks on
Right.
the jobs in the technical service department, 2 weeks, I started saying things like, that's a great question. You know
Yep.
what? I don't want to assume that the answer to that is obvious. For example,
Right.
which is more impact resistant, plastic or glass? What a great question. By the time I got that
Mm-hmm.
question, I already knew it's never what it seems and that I don't know
Right.
anything. And so I say, let me call you back in 15 minutes. Let me get the correct answer. And so I realized,
Right.
even as an ABO certified optician, sitting among these incredible giants in the industry, I knew nothing. And they were patient
Right.
and they helped me. It's overwhelming. By the way, the answer to that
Well, there's
question is the answer to that
all
question.
those variables.
Correct. And the answer to that question is which is more impact resistant, plastic or glass? It depends on how you test it. That's the answer.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a
Yeah.
bowling ball and you drop it on
Right.
a glass hardened lens, it's just going to
Mm-hmm.
bounce right off. If you do that to a
Right.
plastic lens, it will be crushed. But if you take a small projectile at a high velocity, just the opposite occurs. So it depends on how you test it.
Ballistics.
Isn't
Yep.
that amazing?
Yep.
So
Exactly. Yep.
I learned a lot, and I will say that the loss
That's
of
cool.
his picture's right here on my wall. In fact, I have a clock. If you would humor me, give me 1 second. I'm going to show you something because it's right here.
Do it.
This was gifted to me by my dear friend Ralph
Ah.
Kent all those years ago. As soon as I got hired as a technical service representative, as soon as I landed, and it still works. Look, it still works. As soon as I got, no, I haven't changed it for daylight savings. Look at that. So forward, right? I want to go forward. There we go. Um,
There we go.
so this, and I know I don't know if it looks
That's
backwards
so
on your
cool.
screen, but he bought me this,
No, it
had it
actually,
custom made,
it's
and it is
perfect. Yep.
still on my wall, still works to this day, and I still call his wife on a regular basis, like on his birthday, on the day he passed. We lost him during the COVID years, which was just a
Right.
catastrophic industry loss.
There,
He was an
there was
amazing
a few,
person. Yeah.
there was a few people early on in Petaluma that, from my lens crafters days that,
Oh
that,
yes.
that, you know,
Yeah.
that landed there,
Yeah.
and these people were brilliant.
Uh,
These were people that understood things about light refraction that I did not
but
get.
we're also able to
And
explain it in a way that anyone could
right,
grasp it. David
right.
Sklar, Eric Barkin, and David Sklar were the geniuses that
Hmm.
oversaw research and development, materials, coatings,
Right.
designs, especially the design team. They were
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. You talk about lens crafters,
Hmm.
PLC, we refer to them, Precision Lens Crafters,
Yep.
with
Yep.
Sola's largest account, and I
Hmm.
think it was
Oh,
it was pretty
absolutely.
much within my first couple of weeks with the technical service team that I almost lost the LensCrafters account for Sola. And Mark Madison Shupnick called me into his office and taught me what a leader is really all about. He sat me down, he asked me questions. So you spoke to a technician who called in with a question and you said, what exactly did you say? Blah, 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 blah. And he basically said, so you kind of thought out loud on the phone with this particular technician thinking you were helping. Is that about right? And I said, well, sure, yeah. And he said, don't ever do that again because they're ready to send back all of the product because of the conversation you had with that young man. And I'm like, he said, don't worry, Susan, it's not going to come to that. I'm going to take care of this, but I hope you learn a lesson from this. And that was when I started saying, I don't know, but I'm going to get an answer and find out. And then the next time I'd get that question, I knew. So people want to know, how do I know how much I know? I'm convinced that the more I think I know, the more I need to learn. So,
Well, hey, I'm still learning, and one of the coolest things I learned from podcasting, and this is just a recent lesson, but one of the coolest things I've learned from podcasting is, hey, Pete, there's there's at least 4 different ways to tell a gentleman his flies down,
hmm.
and at least 2 of them involve no words. So for you to show up with a cast iron pot and say, "Look at what's happening in your practice," and you can't understand why you're not received warm and fuzzy. It's
Sure,
like, wake up, sir.
sure.
It's all how you're serving the soup, and there is an element to that. It's about discovery, and really, like so many products in our industry, the patients end up driving whatever happens.
Sure.
That they're the ones doing what's happening. They're the ones that are buying online. They're the ones that are changing what we're doing, and they're the ones that are forging the new look.
Yeah,
Which we were talking about that net that's going to cast and where it's going to cast,
sure.
and that's really cool.
Sure.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah. I think
So.
also for me, just not only just wrapping up the conversation about mentorship and why it's so important to me to then e-
Mhm.
exhibit those qualities, and I do. I invest in other people. I'd like to think that some of them
Right.
will be actually at the event in April that I've talked to, that I've
They
helped
will.
groom and train and invested some time and energy
Hmm.
in. But I also
Right.
just want to say that and I hope this is something that the Opticians Association of Pennsylvania pursues moving forward as we grow, are opportunities to get out there and give back, not just as mentoring
Hmm.
each other and helping us uh, move toward a more professional, educated, valuable role in our society and obviously in the eye care industry, but to really, really
Hmm.
give back. I mean, philanthropically, because that little experience, that experience I had with that little 2-year-old girl, multiply that by 2,500 to 5,000 when you go on a mission trip to El Salvador with a group like Eye Care
Hmm.
International, and you're seeing between 3,000 and 5,000 patients over the span of 2 weeks, and between 3,000 and 5,000. So we'll say between 2,500 and 4,500 of them need and receive eyewear, and you're on the dispensing end of that. You get to, but
Right.
really, truly, Peter, you're on the receiving end of it. You don't
Oh,
realize,
absolutely.
you have no idea what it feels like to actually experience that firsthand, what you get out of it, what you receive back by just devoting. And let me tell you, it's not easy to take your 2 paid weeks of vacation and go work your tail off harder than you work in 2 months. Generally, you're on your feet 12 hours a day, sunrise to sunset, and you're giving,
Right.
and
I,
it's
I brought
amazing.
my brother. I brought my brother into lens crafters, the year after me. So he started in '87. He's still there,
Mm,
and what you just described is the only reason he's definitely struggled the last handful of years because they pulled all that. They were pulling it even
sure.
pre-pandemic, the out of
Yes, it's
country
hard.
ones, but they're still actively doing the inner city ones, and he's regularly. I think he's been to Philadelphia 2 or 3 times where they're getting glasses on people that aren't going to get glasses
That's
on them,
right. Yeah.
and I think that it's awesome. It is a part of what we're doing. I presume Vision of Hope is doing the same thing. I wish I knew more, but I need to do some homework there. But that's that. To do that in a nice way where you're not offending anyone, but the reality is they're not being catered to. These are people that aren't here to buy glasses. They're here to see clearly, and that's a different animal. And believe me, there's a totally different level of appreciation and understanding when that's going on. You're right. It is
Sure.
different. It's
Well,
not.
just to give you
It's
a
not the
rough
same.
idea, the Vision of Hope, at least with the OAA, when they started a section of that actually enabled you could submit an application as an optician to say, I'd like to do this thing, go on a trip or serve in this way, and you could literally apply for a
Nice.
grant. And it was actually the OAA's Vision of Hope that paid my airfare, that enabled me to go to El Salvador on the
Nice.
last mission trip I took there. It was our first
Oh,
trip
that's
back after
awesome.
the pandemic. I would, again, those years during the pandemic were very challenging, and I didn't have all of the money that I needed. And I raised some of the money
But
through
you
church, and then
know
they made it possible for me to go. God bless them. God bless them.
that's going to
Yes, of
continue.
course.
That's only going to
Yes.
grow. That should grow even more and in other places too, which I think is really
Yeah, I
exciting.
agree. I agree.
Um, that is something to make sure that we can be involved with in any way that we can, because we have tools of connecting stuff in places that aren't you know just because you can't get 100 opticians to do this doesn't mean it can't be
Sure.
done. Now, is it perfect? Is it seamless? No. But, can it involve some local businesses? Well, sure, maybe. But at the end of the day, it's about getting this done in the most efficient way that we can
Sure.
do it. And there's going to be a lot of tools to connect it, which are really, really
Yep.
awesome. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Susan. I'm going to stop recording here.